This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by Corporate Board Member and host NYSE Euronext, along with Governance Knowledge Partner Paul Weiss and contributing partners National Investor Relations Institute and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to this edition of This Week in the Boardroom. I'm TK Kerstetter with Corporate Board Member, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to what we think will be a special edition of the This Week show. Our topic for this week is going to be CEO board relations, but what makes it special is my guests today are going to be a group that I call the CEO Sisters. And joining me, first of all, to my immediate left is Maggie Wilderotter, who's the chairman and CEO of Frontier Communications Corp. And to her left, her sister, Denise Morrison, president and CEO of the Campbell Soup Company. Ladies, welcome to This Week.
Thank you so much. It's
Good
great
to
be
see you,
here.
TJ.
Yeah.
Now, we can't help but talk about family a little bit on the start of this before we turn to the corporate side. And as a father of two daughters, I'm obviously a proud dad, and they've been successful. And so I can only imagine how your father and parents feel about the success that you guys achieved. So my simple question is, was there anything significant in the raising of you two that have made you such sort of high achievers?
Well, it's a great question, and there isn't one specific answer to that. I think if I look back on my childhood, my parents, both my mom and my dad, really raised us to be self-confident, to be focused on, with a good education, you have freedom and flexibility to do anything you want. They built discipline, responsibility, and accountability into who we are through different programs. Like one of the programs that Denise and I had was a job jar. So every Saturday morning we would come down after sleeping, and we'd have our little jar, and it would have our chores in it for the week.
And we could barter those chores.
And we could trade them. If I didn't want to do the dishes,
by the end of the week.
She could sweep the kitchen floor. And so we learned how to negotiate.
Yes.
We learned that's how we earned our allowance, was through the job jars.
And we were part of a family team.
Right.
And he stressed that you had to contribute to the family and to the team of the family. We were learning business skills without knowing it.
Yeah. And was it just the two of you for siblings, or?
Well, there are four
Yeah.
girls in our family, but
Yes.
but Denise and I are 13 months apart. Our next sister is 5 years younger than I am, and then the baby sister is 10 years younger. So for a big part of our growing up, it was Denise and I with our parents.
Yeah, and he always stressed setting goals and getting good grades. And I would say that in my household, you could never use the word "I can't." It would be "How can you?" And my mother really stressed the fact that ambition was a part of femininity. So those were very good messages to have as children.
So my guilt feelings of being too hard on my daughters with the discipline side.
Go for it.
Yeah, okay.
We had to do a business plan to get our ears pierced when we were kids.
That's right.
Is that right?
To prove that it wasn't a fad, we had to wear the screwback earrings for 1 year.
Yeah.
That was the test market.
Well, everybody's going to like to hear that story. So, well, let me ask you this. The logical question is, how much sort of you guys get to communicate. So let's say that one of you is going to venture in your business into an area that you know the other has already sort of blazed the trail. Mm-hmm. With your busy schedules, do you still get the chance, if you had that, to come up to communicate with each other?
Yeah, well, I would say that, of course, we never cross the lines of confidentiality
Right.
or integrity, but from time to time we do have some pretty robust conversations about getting each other's perspective on things. For example, when I was Chief Operating Officer on my way to CEO, I felt the need to develop a better network of bankers, and Maggie had done a lot of deals in her day, and so she was a good resource to introduce me to some of those people.
And I say Denise and I, we talk on the phone, we email to each other, and we get together every 5 or 6 weeks. And we're big walkers. We go for walks, long walks together.
That's right.
And that gives us time to get caught up as sisters, but it also gives us time to talk about things that we're either working on or things we're challenged by, and we're very good at helping each other. I know when I took this job at Frontier, in making that transition, I went to Denise and sort of laid out the pros and cons, and she sort of helped me through that decision process.
I think from the time we were kids, we had a great opportunity to, tear apart ideas from different perspectives.
Yep.
Well, I'm feeling the energy already, so that's probably a good thing. So let me turn to the corporate world, to the CEO world. I'm famous on this show for sort of talking about the unspoken CEO skill set of learning how to guide the board without the board feeling, in the sense, guided. There's a lot of purists, governance purists, that would say, that they worry that the word guiding, or the CEO's role might turn into something like the imperial CEO or whatever. The reality is, anybody that's been in the position or has been a director realizes that you just don't know that much about the company, that you need guidance. So my question to you guys is there any sort of keys or process that you have found in communicating with a chairman or lead director or the board that you have found as be helpful that you can share with our audience?
I'll start, and I know, Denise, you can jump in. But, with my board at Frontier, I am the chairman and CEO. But even as the chairman, I look at my role as making sure that it's a collective group of people together setting the strategy and the accountabilities for our business. And I have a great lead director who I do talk to constantly. He's also very good at chairing the executive sessions and bringing feedback back to me. And I try to be as transparent as possible with our board. So I start our board meetings usually with a one-on-one with the directors without other folks in the room. And we just candidly talk about the business. What's going well? What are the challenges? What are we working on? Getting their advice on things we're doing versus just always bringing things that are baked to the boardroom. I really look for that talent to give me input and direction. And I've honed that skill over time with our board, and it really makes a huge difference. It really does.
Yeah, we have a governance system where we have a chairman, and I'm the CEO. And our relationship is building, but is very, very constructive at this point. I just went through a whole process with our board to lay out the new strategic direction for Campbell's. And I found that, and I did it over the course of several board meetings, which really allowed myself and the management team to get into great depth and great candor with them. And I found that driving that alignment on goals and direction for the company was building trust has been really, really very important. And I also make use of the executive sessions. I want transparency. I have great directors on our board that are giving us some very, very constructive advice and challenges, and I really enjoy that.
I also think that the work of the board is an ongoing conversation. It's not just about getting in a meeting room 6 times a year. I'm very proactive with communication to the board, one-on-one discussions with board members. Mm-hmm. I send out emails on statuses of the business in between the board meetings. And situationally, depending on what's going on, if there are critical deliverables that we're working on, I'll be more frequent with that communication. So I do think that you have to keep board members up to speed of what's going on and have the respect to make sure they're in the loop on the key decisions.
The chairman and I also established a protocol where when board directors come in for a meeting, we also have them do one-on-ones with some of the key players on the management team so they can get to know them and how they think and get a little deeper into their business. So that's a process that works out very well, and it's very motivating for our people.
And I have a mentor program.
Yeah.
Each of my board members are assigned one of our senior leaders for a 2-year window on a mentorship, and then after 2 years we rotate. So my goal is over a 7 to 10 year window. every one of my board members have gotten a chance to spend quality time with a majority of the senior leadership in the company. So from a succession planning perspective, they're very knowledgeable of those folks, what they can do, what the potential is for them in the company.
Well, we all know that directors do not like to be surprised.
Right.
So that
Right.
anything you can do so that they aren't surprised.
Neither
is
do
a good,
CEOs.
Right. Let's say nobody likes to be surprised.
Yeah, we're very aligned on that subject.
Yeah. When I was thinking of the questions that I could ask you guys, one of my favorite ones as I was putting this together was the what you each may have learned. Both of you have sat. You sat. Denise, on the Goodyear board.
That's right.
Maggie, you sit on the Xerox and Procter & Gamble board currently.
Right. Mm-hmm.
When you sit on the other side of the table, okay, where we're used to the CEO trying to do that, what have you learned sitting on the other side that has translated into making you a better CEO?
Yeah. Well, for example, I just went through a succession with Doug Conant, and actually, when I was on the Goodyear board, I also went through a succession on the other side of the table between Bob Keegan and Rich Kramer, and that was enormously helpful to really understand the process. And the Campbell board did use a world-class process, and so did Goodyear. So I really benefited from that. But I also think it's keeping information at a high enough level when you're communicating with directors, and then if they want to go deeper for more detail, you can provide it, and that way you don't get into the weeds. You can really stay on point with the strategy. That's been a big takeaway, and then also the education on how all the committees work with the full board.
Yeah, I think the whole governance process of how Xerox or Procter & Gamble do the business of the board has always been helpful for me to bring back best practices and good ideas to how we evolve our governance processes at Frontier. Like Denise, I went through 2 succession plans with A.G. Lafley and Bob McDonald, and then Ann Mulcahy and Ursula Burns. So great strategic input on how you look at succession planning over a multi-year period of time, especially as you're grooming internal candidates. And I'd say the other thing is, as a CEO sitting in a boardroom, I have a lot of respect for not crossing the line into managing that company. That's what management's job is. And really making sure that I'm acting as a board member in that room, not the CEO.
Boy, we'll have to save that tape for all those occasions where
The thin line.
the thin line that happens, which we've all been subject to at one point or another. I know that you both care a lot about diversity and diversity on board. So I want to ask you, we've gone through a year where there really hasn't been, there had been progress in the past that seemed to have slowed down a little bit. One of the things that you always hear is we've got to get women into the key positions, the CFOs and the CEO positions that typically they will be offered opportunities. But when we were talking ahead of time, you said that's not always the case. So sort of what do we have to do to move the needle with this, assuming that the logic says that there should be continued growth with this, that there's a small percentage that are serving, and just from the optics of making sure that you're representative of the customers you serve, you would expect there to be a higher number of women serving on boards that there is. So how can we move the needle on this?
Well, I think we're both big advocates for helping women get onto boards. I know I'm very proactive about that in my network of CEOs that I know and other board members. I've always had a philosophy, when you get on a board as a woman, my goal has always been to have more women on that board with me. So I usually get onto the nominating and governance committee, and I'm able then to bring candidates forth that they wouldn't have seen before and wouldn't have been able to think about as a possibility for the board. And I'm very proud that I've been on many boards where I was the first woman on those boards, and I left those boards with multiple women on the boards. And I think we have to be advocates to help move women forward. And as CEOs of big companies, we get the calls.
Right.
Because they want CEOs.
Right.
And
but
when
there's
you're
only 15.
Right. But when we're full up, what we can do is actually be an advocate for other women that we know that are great women and should be on boards.
Right. I think that the day of just having female CEOs or sitting CEOs needs to be brought into C-suite women,
right,
that have cross-functional skill sets. I mean, if the board is designing their table around experiences needed and can look at a diverse slate of those skills, of which women are included, that's a great first step. It really is, and there is a whole pool of wonderful C-suite women that could serve on boards and make a big difference in creating value.
Yeah, and I would send a message to all of the directors that are watching this. If you're looking for more board members, call Denise, call me. We'll be happy to give you a slate of great candidates that are women.
It is somewhat ridiculous when somebody says there aren't qualified candidates out there.
There are many, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I wish everybody in the audience could feel the energy that I feel talking with you two, and I just want to thank you
well,
for
we
taking...
can actually even hug each other as CEOs.
Yes.
It's really nice.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on this week, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank
and
you.
you made
Thank
some
you.
offer. You may get some phone calls
I
about
hope so. That'd
that,
be great.
so that would be great. And that will conclude this edition of This Week in the Boardroom. We'll be back next week where we cover another critical topic that will be helpful to you as a board member or a committee member, and we will see you then. Thanks a lot.
Join us again next week for This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by Corporate Board Member and host NYSE Euronext, along with Governance Knowledge Partner Paul Weiss and contributing partners National Investor Relations Institute and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.